Hey, everybody, welcome to another episode of Legal Tech Week. This is the show where we talk about the top stories of the week in legal tech and innovation. I'm Bob Ambrogi, and I have a blog called Law Sites and a podcast called Law Next. We've got a full house today of panelists. It's good to see everybody here, including Caroline Hill, who tells me she ran back from a beautiful sunny day. It can't be sunny now, it's nighttime, right? But a
Oh, it's
beautiful day anyway, a beautiful warm day, just to make our show. So, Caroline, why don't you kick us off with your introduction?
Thank you. I literally ran. I'm so excited to be here. Thanks for having me. Yeah, Caroline Hill, editor-in-chief of Legal IT Insider, based in the UK, where it is 8 p.m. and it's beautiful.
All right, and straight from Texas, as you can see, is Nikki Black.
Yeehaw, y'all. I am wearing this hat. Bob told me that I should, otherwise I probably wouldn't be. That I got at the
Did
Affinity
I say
outside
that?
last week. So it has my initials branded it and everything. But I am Nikki Black with a hat today. I am the principal legal insight strategist at Affinipay. I write legal tech columns for ABA Journal Above the Law, Daily Record, and I also oversee and author our legal industry report on the Affinipay side of things that was just released 2 months ago, I think. So excited to be here. I've got my cowboy boots on too. No, not really. I don't have cowboy boots. Not yet.
Not yet. All right. After the big conference you guys are having in September, we can all get cowboy boots.
Maybe.
Yeah. And Stephanie, you're just back from the UK, right?
Yeah, I flew back yesterday and it is quite warm and it stays a lot later. It stays light a lot later than you would think it does. I can contest that. Um, so yeah, I'm Stephanie Wilkins, Director of Content at Legal Tech Hub. And I also think I've never had allergies my entire life, and I think I had hay fever in London. Everybody,
It's pretty
pollen there is
bad. It's pretty
insane.
bad. There's just everything in the air right now.
Yeah. So that was a fun new development as I'm getting older.
Did you get to see Caroline?
We're happy to
Yeah,
share.
she was at the LTH conference last week. Was that a week ago already? Yes.
Yeah.
Perfect.
So yeah.
Yeah.
All right. And straight from exotic Chicago, Victor.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Victor Lee. I am assistant managing editor for the ABA Journal. It was 80 degrees here one day, and then the next day it was like 40. Um, so my son didn't quite understand the drop in temperature. He thought it was still 80 degrees. So he was like, I want to go to school in shorts. We were like, no. And then he like was not happy with that. So that was not a very fun morning in the Lee household, but that's Chicago for you.
All right. And Steve, I don't know where you are today with somewhere.
I'm no place exotic. Steve Embry, I write the blog Tech Law Crossroads, and I also write from time to time for Above the Law, and I will be in Las Vegas for the Clock Conference covering for Above the Law next week. So looking forward to that.
And last but not least, Joe.
Joe Patrice from Above the Law. I will not be at Clock, which is heartening as somebody who's been on the road more or less constantly for a month. But just back from my last conference, and I now get a break for about a month. It's exciting.
All right. And so, well, let's start there because Joe, you and Steve were both at the ILTA Evolve conference this week. Both of you, I think both of you went last year. I haven't been to that yet.
Mhm.
So, how was it, and what kind of stood out about it?
Yeah, I mean, I like it. This is my second time going. I really like it to the extent that, this is going to sound, this is in the inside baseball. But when we go to conferences, this group, we are usually inundated with meetings, jumping from one vendor to the next who's scheduled a little bit of time to tell us something. We don't really get to see a lot of the show proper because we're fairly busy. This show, not that there aren't vendors there who are willing to talk, but it's smaller. Its focus is more limited. It just kind of has two tracks talking about AI and cybersecurity. So you have a lot more free time to go focus on the substance. Even to the extent you meet up with vendors, a lot of the times they want to meet with you during breaks because they don't want to get in the way of the programming. So I really like it for that purpose. It's kind of the only show I go to where I get to enjoy the actual show that they're putting on.
Yeah, I had the same thoughts. I think last week somebody asked if they capped attendance, and based on some of the things that they were saying at the conference, I think they do cap attendance and limit it. Yeah, and the tracks were good. The presentations were good. I went to most of the AI stuff. Somewhat ironically, Joe and I both ended up writing a story on the cybersecurity track, but by and large, the cybersecurity track was composed of people that were talked way over my head. I really had very little
Yeah.
notion of what they were talking about, so I kind of camped out in the AI track when I at least had some ability to understand the terms, if not the concepts.
That is one aspect of the cybersecurity track, because a lot of the attendees are in the weeds of it at all times. They do have a tendency to blow by the general concepts and get really into technical details. That said, there were a couple, and I Steve missed this one because you left before it was the last one that I was able to attend. There was a good one that was being put on from Act 4 about going through real examples from their anonymized examples from their business, talking about whether or not you should pay the ransom in a ransomware situation, which was really interesting. Like giving the details, like it's this kind of company, this is how much was lost, this is how much we could figure out from data mining, and would you pay it? Would you not pay it? And like audience, it was an interesting game about which times it was for the best and not for the best, which times overlapping jurisdictions laws play into it. So that was fun. But you're right, some of them can be a little over the top. I think both of us wrote in large part about the opening keynote, because the opening keynote was cybersecurity related, and Tara Wheeler talked about her work as a cybersecurity consultant and senior fellow for the Council of Foreign Relations, and we learned a lot of very terrifying things about global cyber warfare, and one like kind of positive thing. Apparently, they all the people who are tracking this have determined that China follows the Geneva Conventions and the Rome Statute when they launch cyber attacks. They don't attack critical infrastructure or medical, which is something nobody knew for sure, but apparently they don't, which is an exciting development. So we're not all going to die. But yeah, no, so that was interesting. We learned how to pick a lock. So
That's the
that was
part I wanted to
exciting.
hear about.
Yeah. It terrified.
She was doing it on stage and showing you how to do it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. As she pointed out, this is so easy that I have no fears doing this live on stage. She was popping those master locks one after another. She showed me how to do it later. I've known her for like 30 years at this point, or so. So I haven't seen her most of that time, but I did know her when she was in high school. So I chatted with her afterwards a little bit, and she gave me a demonstration on how to pick. So I now know how to do that.
And I'm sure Joe did not add, so I will, that she made a point at the end of her presentation to mention Joe and the fact that he was her high school debate coach, which I thought was very gracious of her to do that.
Yeah.
So if Steve and Joe are both driving Ferraris in a month's time, and
Does anybody remember there was an ABA Tech Show program years ago where John Simek of Sharon Nelson and John Simek fame did it on cybersecurity, but he basically, from the stage while he was speaking, hacked into one of the audience members' computers or several of the audience members' computers or something like that.
Yeah.
Just to show how easy it was to do.
Yeah. Was it a tech show where I can't remember the consultant's name, but he brought his teenage son.
Yeah.
Yeah. And to gave demonstrations. That was
Ben Weinberger.
pretty interesting.
Yep.
Wasn't it? It
Carol.
was Weinberger. Ben Weinberger brought his son.
Yeah, that's who it was. Yeah, I couldn't remember his name.
A little bit of hacking and stuff, yeah.
So a keynote speaker who was not talking about AI and who was not a celebrity. That's different all around.
It's been a
sort
while.
of a celebrity. I mean, if you go read her biography, she's certainly a celebrity in the cybersecurity world.
Well, she wasn't a Hollywood star.
Correct. She is not a Hollywood star.
Well,
But
I
she
love
did
the,
know
Yeah.
Joe Patrice.
She's the Jake
Right,
Gyllenhaal.
which
She's the Jake Gyllenhaal of cybersecurity, right? Or Maggie Gyllenhaal, I guess.
I wonder if instead of like compensating her for speaking, they're like, you can just hack into everyone's bank accounts there. We give you permission. Just steal all their money and you're good. Right? Like
yeah, I was mentioned during the keynote, and then later that day, independently, I was apparently mentioned on the Dan Levitard show. So I had a good run of being name checked all day that day.
nice.
All right.
And I just hung out with the celebrity Joe Patrice followed him around,
Well,
Yeah,
I
so
mean,
before,
my entourage, my
Yeah,
entourage of
I
Steve.
even followed him into the bars to make sure, things would go swimmingly.
Mhm.
How'd that go?
Swimmingly.
Swimmingly.
trying to figure out how to pick the lock at the locked liquor cabinet at the bar there. What was this? So the other thing we were talking a little bit before we started going live on this show, but Steve, you wrote about Zach Abramowitz's 2 hour keynote. What was he talking about for 2 hours?
Well, all things AI. He gave a history, and he kind of talked about how we got where we are, and sort of laid the groundwork to sort of how they work. And he had a lot of interesting points. I mean, one of the things that he talked about was the fact that plaintiffs' contingency fee lawyers are using AI tools to spit out demand letters, because they can, and they don't have to spend as much time composing them, coming up with numbers, figuring out the exposure, figuring out whether the case is good. And so his conclusion was that these AI tools, instead of decreasing litigation or decreasing time that needs to be spent on litigation, they're going to increase litigation matters. And he had some statistics sort of suggesting that that's already the case. And that's, kind of consistent with what a lot of defense lawyers have been telling me, and that is there's more cases, and the plaintiffs' lawyers are suddenly much better at their craft than they were before, which sort of suggests that may be due to the ability to use AI tools. So that I thought that part was really pretty fascinating. The other thing that he mentioned was that he believes that in the future we're going to see AI first firms, where you may have 4 or 5 partners that come together a virtual firm, and use Gen AI tools to practice their cases almost entirely. Sort of the notion being that they don't really need all the trappings of a very large law firm anymore. I don't think we're there yet, but it's an interesting concept. And who knows where we might end up. And
You
then the
know,
final thing he told us is that he thinks the tools are really good at strategizing, even better than doing mundane tasks. And then he told us that we should A, give our AI tool a name, and B, feel free to get mad and cuss at it on occasion if it doesn't do right.
right. Yeah, I've heard that one too from other folks. I'll say about the AI first small firm thing, just because it ties back to a conversation we had on this show last week or the week before, where I was kind of taking the stance that I don't know if that'll happen, because the amount of knowledge base that you can have inside your document management system is so valuable, and will become even more valuable in a world of AI, where I think that being able to draw upon colleagues' accumulated knowledge might be more of a value play, and mean that you're less likely to go solo. And I actually had a conversation in the bar, it will be surprising, with a IT head of a large firm, who suggested to me that I was wrong, but I was right in the abstract, but that the realities of it are wrong. And the reason, he said, was it would be great if you could draw upon all the data in the DMS, but nobody's letting anybody do that anymore, because the cybersecurity fears are so bad that all of us are locking down even our own internal DMS now. You get access to only the stuff you immediately need. And so maybe it's true that unless they find a solution for that, maybe the big firms can't necessarily draw upon their collected knowledge.
Yeah,
I talked about.
I think Zach's theory was not that this would be sort of the inexperienced lawyers or the lawyers without a big book of business. It would, in fact, be the very high-end sort of expert lawyers with big books of business that can manage their own documents and sort of take them with them and call upon that as their sort of experience base. So normally it'd be interesting to see.
There's kind of two aspects to that whole flooding the courts with litigation, because there's also the pro se side of that, which has
Yeah.
been a concern I think we've talked about before, but the potential for AI to empower self-represented people to be more effective in filing pleadings and getting lawsuits started and bringing lawsuits.
Right.
And I remember we talked, I might have probably mentioned this before, but at a Harvard symposium I was at last year on AI and law, they talked about this concept of distributed denial of justice attack. That there will be so many lawsuits getting filed that can effectively shut down the courts or really hamper the courts, and the courts just aren't ready for what can happen because of AI.
And I pointed out in my article too that it's not necessarily litigation. If this is what's our future is going to be, because when you think about people or small businesses with legal problems now, they go to a lawyer and the lawyer just costs too much to do the work. I mean, the value of what you're getting out is less than what it costs to spend to get it. But if you can shift that where the AI tools do a lot of the work, so it suddenly becomes economically feasible to do some of these lower end tasks, then that's a whole different pool of work that's out there to grab.
Hey,
Along
so
with
Steve, I know you got to go pretty soon, so why don't we shift over to the story you wanted to talk about this week, or have we heard enough from you? I don't know.
That's,
No, no.
that's up to you. You're the moderator here.
Yeah,
You
no,
can
I thought
always pull it.
it was an interesting story, and
Yeah.
big.
So it was an article by John Campisi of Business Law Report, I think it's the publication. But he was saying that the Ackerman law firm has hired what they are calling a director of connections, and this person's task is basically to facilitate interactions between lawyers that are working in the office and lawyers that are working outside of the office, and generate the kind of engagement and involvement to help those teams work most effectively and in a collaborative fashion, which I thought was interesting. He also noted that the Hush Blackwell firm and the Fenimore Craig firm have done something similar. Quinn Emanuel has allowed all their lawyers to work any place and everywhere for a while, and it made me wonder if we're sort of at the point now where a lot of law firms are just going to begrudgingly accept the hybrid model and decide this is the new reality, and if we want to continue to draw the kind of talent that we want to draw, we're going to have to accept that reality and enable these kind of interactions to take place and try to eliminate some of the drawbacks to people that are working remotely that aren't able to be part of the firm in the same way that the people in the office are. So I thought all of that was kind of interesting to me, and I've been a proponent of remote work for some time, and I hope it is sort of an acceptance that this is the new reality, and law firms are going to have to deal with it.
I mean, I
You're
saw
muted,
that
Bob.
I'm muted.
Oh, I saw that Jamie Dimon said that he supports remote work. For instance, he thinks that people should be able to remote work on Saturdays and Sundays. So I saw that quote this week, I think without any hint of irony, and I thought of Big Law.
So
But
remember when
does this mean all these
everybody's
firms are going to jump on the bandwagon of having a chief connections officer now, or is this just another name for a human resources officer or something like that?
I did think it was a kind of a funny name, but hey, I guess if that's what you want to, if that's your job description, I'm not sure I could come up with something better. So
One
I
thing
think
I
we'll
wanted to mention, just speaking of large law firms and I guess new roles in large law firms. This morning I was on Fordham Law has a series, and I was on the last webinar version of that series. And the other person on the panel was David Cunningham. He's the CIO of Reed Smith. And at one point when he was talking, he mentioned how when he was at sort of on the pricing issue, I sort of pushed him on that to get understanding how they were dealing with pricing and AI and what that was looking like in their firm. And he said that when he was on a partner retreat recently, one of the partners came up to him and had said that they just gotten like something out really quickly out the door using one of their AI tools and how it's so wonderful. And I said, well, how's that working with pricing? Like you had this quick turnover. And he said that they're starting to try to sort of find a balance between value to the client and getting things out the door quickly, and that helps them be more competitive in the space. So I thought that was kind of interesting to hear from one of the, CIOs of one of the largest firms, what that kind of looks like, or larger firms. But I thought it was interesting.
Well, talking about big firms working in new ways can transition us to Caroline, to your story.
Not the dragon one, the other one.
Did you put in two? I only saw one.
No, it's one.
Oh, I forgot about the dragon one. Yeah, we could do, well, no, yeah, no. Let's do the big firm one first, and
Yeah,
then
yeah.
the dragon one was a very small firm, right?
Sorry, so no, yeah, it was just easy. So yeah,
We
so
could
this
get to our whole lawyers behaving badly segment in a little bit.
so this just came out today, and it's going to be an evolving thing where I learn and we all learn, and I'm really, one of the reasons for running back was because I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. It's so BCLP, they they're going to make 8% of their global business services staff redundant. They've started a process.
Brian, did you say Brian Cave? For anybody who doesn't know what BCLP is.
Yes, sorry, Brian
Yeah,
Cave, later Paisner, are they've started a process to make 8% of their global business services team redundant. And I mean, we are seeing this happen more and more. So DWF last week, it was revealed that they're also making quite a large number of business services. It's not just business services, but there's a big chunk of business services people redundant. But what was really interesting with Brian Cave, Leighton Paisner, it focuses exclusively on business services. So that does include paralegals and knowledge lawyers, but it also includes tech, finance, admin support, facilities, etc. And what was really interesting to me, because sometimes you get these situations and they didn't particularly want to come, I can't remember who broke the story first, it wasn't me, I hate to say, but and then quite often they'll just confirm basic details. But in this case, they've actually we've got quite a lot of details, and I'm sure some others have, in terms of the global COO, who's called Trevor Varnes. He said, it was his quote, he said, "We see embracing new ways of working, including investing in technology capabilities as a cornerstone of our growth. This means taking next steps towards enhancing operational efficiency, leveraging digital solutions and market-leading technology to modernize our processes, aka that's why we're making the redundancies." And it was just really interesting because we've talked about Gen AI and we've talked about the impact on people, and we've, but for me, this is a really early doors. Oh, okay, so what does it mean? As yet, I haven't provided much comment. I've just kind of provided the facts and without much comment. But it's just quite interesting that they're being very upfront about this. And sometimes you think, sometimes is it convenient? Like, is it they're using tech as a convenient reason to kind of, people go, oh yeah, at Gen AI, that's why they're making the redundancy. So, we obviously all need to look into these stories in more depth. But the CEO, Steve Ballmer, said, as we look to the future, we need to ensure our operations are fit to support our growth ambitions and client focus. They're really clear and definite about this. So I just thought it was kind of really interesting in terms of what this means and what more we're gonna see this year.
I think that redundancy word is really interesting. I mean, it's sort of a counterpoint to the story we talked about last week about the ABA study on hiring of new lawyers, talking about, in fact, firms are hiring of new lawyers is up in law firms, and here you're focused more on the business side of the firm. And that term redundancy is like redundant with what? Well, it's redundant with technology, right? It's redundant with AI. It's redundant with other things we can do where we don't need humans to do it anymore. So I don't know. It's an interesting way to put it.
Yeah. And it's just very, I mean, we all feel, we talk about this, what's going to be the impact on people, right? And everybody's been either wondering or worrying, depending on where you are. But I just feel like this is a very early example of where they're saying, well, it's here, you know, if it's as straightforward as what it says on the tin, then it's here. We're seeing the impact of technology on people in terms of reducing the numbers. I mean, this has been happening around the edges, you know, we know this, but it was just kind of very upfront about it, which was interesting. I don't know if anybody else sort of saw it or has any thoughts in terms of whether I'm being naive or, you know, whether there's another angle to this or not, but maybe it's just pretty straightforward.
Need to sign off, everyone. So I will say have a good weekend, and I'll be back hopefully next week.
All right,
Nice to
Steve.
see you.
Good
Take
Thanks for
care.
joining us. All right, Caroline, you ran all the way back from the sunny beer drinking day, and nobody has comments on your story.
I'll post it in the chat if anyone has any thoughts in the order.
Now you're gonna need another drink.
Oh yeah, I know. The dragon one would have been more fun, right?
Well, we can do the dragon one because we've got plenty of lawyers behaving badly stories this week. And I don't know, maybe I don't know, Stephanie, since you were sort of venting your outrage in your column this week over one of those lawyers behaving badly stories, we could do that one and then talk about the dragon one.
Yeah, I mean, I refrain from mentioning things that would be akin to the dragon, like surprising the court with that avatar, like all the other things. But no, I just decided this week to just pull out my soapbox, which I've done a little bit before about like how like it's been 2 years almost now since Mata Via Bianca, and like we still have a regular litany of lawyers using AI improperly and generating cases. And I know every time I mention it, somebody is like, well, people don't know it as much as we know it. But like, at what point, like, how are people going to learn? At what point is too much too much? Like, what is going to stop this? And like, I'm just like, I've had it. I feel like, I don't know. I feel like I should be, I don't know. It was just a soapbox rant, and that's where I am.
But this one was even better because not
Yeah.
only did the lawyer file hallucinated cases, but this is a same lawyer who was caught with his pants off in a Zoom hearing in court a year ago. I mean, how do you manage to do two things like that in the course of a year
And stay employed. And but
and
also just
stay
like it
employed?
wasn't just like it was like they estimated up to 30 hallucinated citations. Like this wasn't just like a little overlook of a thing. It's just I just don't have I don't know if I ever had sympathy, but if I did, it's gone. And I'm also just more so like what is the tipping point? How do we actually what's it going to take to actually educate people on this or get people to do their jobs?
I think that just is an example of the ugly underbelly of incompetence. Like clearly this is not the first time this guy has had these types of things happen. They just haven't been caught on camera or like this hasn't been like completely made up cases, right? He's probably submitted so much crap and signed his name to it to the courts that was completely, you know, didn't even make any sense, you know, incomprehensible, but everyone just assumes he's competent and they presume he's a good guy. And so they give him the benefit of the doubt. I'm completely confident this guy's been doing this kind of thing his whole career. And I totally get your rant. Like, but I think that it is super frustrating, but I think it's got nothing to do with the technology and more to do with just these jokers getting away with crap their whole careers.
Oh, I 100% agree. This is not a technology problem. This is a people problem.
Oh, come on, having no pants on is a Zoom problem. That's not a
Um,
lawyer problem.
No, that's a
yeah.
lack of
But
decorum or respect
no, but
for what you're
seriously,
doing.
like, and I don't disagree with you that maybe this is just people who are always incompetent, but maybe now we have a better ability to weed out incompetent lawyers. But so rather than just being like, oh, here's another story, like, what do we do about it? I'm just so over it. I'm definitely not blaming the technology. This is a lawyer incompetence problem.
I feel
But
the same.
nothing seems to.
Is it disciplinary matter? Surely there should be like a code of conduct situation here where
Well, I
you're
mean,
like, you know what,
we
buddy?
have requirements for tech competency. We have some sanctions being given out. Apparently, none of that is working. I am just, yeah, this is nothing insightful, but it's just a frustrated rant on my part. And also, like, it's the guy who's representing the My Pillow guy. So it's just like, it just gets to be a more
It just
ridiculous.
makes it better.
Yeah.
It's interesting, and you point this out in your column, Stephanie, that the guy on Friday afternoon or something, after the judge issued the show cause for sanctions, he filed a response saying, "Oh, we filed the wrong document. We had actually gone through and site checked and realized we'd made mistakes, and we didn't file the updated version of the document." Which, as you say, that's just
I
as
don't
bad. I
care.
mean,
I know.
that's still
It's
a
like,
screw
oh,
up. I mean, it's like
I was on vacation, so I didn't realize somebody didn't file the right draft because apparently we had 30 fake case citations, did a different draft, but then still filed the wrong one because I was on vacation. I don't care. Like, I just don't care. Put your pants on, figure out how to do your job. Like,
Who are they? The Department of Justice filing the wrong thing? For those who didn't see that, they filed their memo explaining that they had no case in a case. They threw that on the docket. Um, so their internal research memo. Yeah, no, I mean, we've all talked about it being a people problem. So given that, and I think we do have existing rules that should take care of it, I do wonder to what extent we fall into this, and we talk about this in other contexts a lot. I know it came up last week. We talked about, well, who doesn't already know XYZ? And it's because we hang out with a crowd of people who are a little more savvy about this stuff than others. And I do wonder to what extent some of this problem is that there's an educational disconnect, whether that's the way the hype cycle operates, whether it's the way the consumer facing media surrounding AI operates, whatever it is. I do genuinely believe that some of these people making these mistakes really do think that when they type something into Chat GPT, it's as good as asking Lexus. It is not, but somehow they've been taught that, and they shouldn't do that. And there are other reasons why it's still an ethical violation not for them to have checked up on it, yada, yada. But there is some disconnect that needs to be pushed back against, because I think some of these people just aren't savvy, and it shows.
I
yes,
see what you're doing
I
there. You're
agree with
trying to
that.
cue up Victor's story there. I can tell, but we're going to hold
I
off on
agree.
that for a second.
I agree with that, but I'm also going to yes and it. But so how do we do that then? And how do we we're screaming to our blue in the face. Something at some point, something's got to give. And like Michelle just said in the comments, I feel the exact same way. My favorite reason for going to sessions at conferences, no offense to presenters, is to hear the questions that are asked in the Q&A, because that's what tells you what people know and what they don't know. And I sometimes it always bursts my bubble on how little people know, but still, how do we do that? Because we're doing that. If they're not reading what we're writing, what do we, I don't know. This is all frustration, but you could tell I wrote this while I was in London because I said trousers rather than pants.
Yeah.
But I don't agree with you on that, because this is not, this is, yeah, all right, go ahead.
Let me throw out a different hypothesis here. Maybe the MyPillow lawyer thinks, because look, a lot of these guys think they're bulletproof now, right? They got what they wanted. They got their guy in the White House. They probably think, well, we don't have to really do anything now. We'll just get what we want, because either a judge will get like one of his judges will give it to us, or we'll like our dear leader will think of something and help us out, or this and that. So this guy probably thought he was bulletproof and didn't think he needed to check anything.
Yeah.
In the big firms, it's interesting because in the big firms they're obviously doing lots of training. Like in order they've got access to new tech, and in order to use it, most of the big firms I speak to, you have to have training. But then obviously the types of firms, it should become just a matter of competence, right? Like there should be some training, compulsory training. I think that with whether however you deliver that, whether it be I think the professional bodies need to start insisting that it's a mandatory requirement.
But this is 100% not a tech competence issue. This is one, as we've all said at various times, you learn in law school, your first year of law school, to check the citations in a brief. You don't have to know anything about AI to know that you need to check the citations. And if you're not checking the citations,
the fact that it's so astonishing, and Stephanie, I'm so with you on this rant. It's so astonishing that some people are still here. But I get the fact that it's such a leap for anybody who's not involved in our world, who actually isn't reading. And I think it's insane if people aren't up on at least on this. But anyway, if you're not up on the fact that it hallucinates, you know, it's so incomprehensible, you know, but I guess, yeah, you're right. I mean, everybody, as a lawyer, an intelligent practicing lawyer, surely there should be an obligation just to just to read. And I take your point about that you should just be checking your sources, etc. But I get the incomprehensibility of the whole thing if you haven't been following what's going on.
Like, do the bar associations, does every lawyer have to get a nasty gram being like, in case you've never heard of this, don't do this? Like, I don't know.
I mean, I read, like when I was a younger lawyer, I don't even know, does anybody even use these like practice treatises things anymore? But you know, there would be you always use these kind of treatises to sort of get into an issue of law, and there would be like these always be these citations like this case stands for the proposition of whatever, and lawyers would the incompetence in those days with lawyers would just copy and paste that into a brief without actually reading the case. And if you actually go and read the case, a lot of those times you'd find it doesn't actually say what this treatise says it says, or it doesn't say it in the way it says it. So, you know, it's not a tech issue. It's been an issue for as long as lawyers have been citing cases, I think.
I think one thing that may be problematic, and I experienced it this morning, that may be challenging for people that aren't fully educated on this. I was trying to get a data point on what percentage of lawyers are small firm attorneys before this talk I did this morning. And I asked ChatGPT and got in a fight with it because I kept saying, well, what's the source? And it would like give me a source and I'd look at the source and that data wasn't even in it. I'm like, that's not in that report. Well, but I pulled it from this. So then I'm like, all right, let me go to Gemini. And so I tried to get Gemini to like hone in on this data point, and it started to argue with me. And they both got very defensive. I'm like, you're wrong. It's not in the report. And they're like, well, but it's from the report and the internet, all my sources. And so I made it at one point go through all the steps it went through. Like I was kind of berating both tools because it was being so lazy. Both of them were. And if you don't, and I understood that it made stuff up, and I was trying to get it to find me an accurate source. But if you don't understand that, and these tools kind of gloss over stuff, I mean, I can see how a lawyer might think, even like if they think they can go back and forth with it and get it to be accurate, versus, I don't know, read the case, you know, the way you're supposed to. But still, I can sometimes see how maybe they don't understand that these things have a personality of their own almost. They're turning into adolescent. You know, I always like feel like they're just cranky adolescents who just want to be negative just to be negative. Maybe it's me. Maybe mine are spitting back at me what I give to them. I don't know. But
All right, so we have one other lawyers
Maybe they
behaving
don't like
badly.
it.
Just one other?
Maybe they don't like being yelled at by you, Nikki. I mean, you know, it's.
But I also welcome them, as you mentioned in the comments. Like, so it's, you know, it's a balance. It's a give and a take. You know, they gotta like, we gotta meet somewhere in the middle.
They were like, we thought we had that one. We thought she was on our side.
Right, I'm just confusing him probably. I'm gaslighting him.
He's just herding cattle there right now or something with that hat on, you know. So before we get to why we should be teaching about AI, we have the watermark or whatever it was story. Caroline, you wanted to do that one, or who wants to do that one?
I mean, Nikki actually drew this my attention
Oh,
to
did
this.
Nikki have that?
Well, no, I wrote it, but
Oh.
so it was very funny and it's caused a lot of fun on LinkedIn, apart from for the lawyer who submitted this. So it was an e-filing that got struck out by a federal judge in Michigan because I shall share it so you can have a look at the pretty picture of the dragon. So all of the filings had got the watermark of the firm, which was a pink dragon, and so the judge struck out the filing on the basis that it contravened the practice rules, and then the plaintiff had to resubmit it, which I thought was very funny. And I mean, as we go to, it's one of these things, and it was I forget, there was who it was. So yeah, a director from the law library at Capital University Law School shared it and said to her students, don't do this. And as we move to more, you know, the court's becoming digitized, it's quite funny because you don't think to say don't do this, but it seems really obvious, but it's one of these like lawyer fails that perhaps every now and then it causes a lot of hilarity and perhaps a reminder of what not to do.
Did you share? Are you able to share it?
I just shared it. It's got the
Did you?
best thing about that link I just
Oh,
shared.
but you can actually screen share it if you wanted to, if you had it up, but that does that. No, that
Oh,
never
I
mind.
just
Never mind. You got the post.
people
That's
click on
good.
the link and you can see that
Yeah,
I
yeah.
shared on the link. I shared a picture screenshot of the filing with the dragon in the background. And so there's been lots of fun on LinkedIn with, so obviously Latera's got quite a lot of connections with Dragon. So their chief marketing officer commented on how much fun everyone's been having following this story. But apart from, yeah, as I said, the plaintiff whose filing has been struck out.
But I was trying to think like what rule of civil procedure does this actually violate? Well, like what's wrong with putting a watermark on your filing? We were talking, wasn't it like last week we were talking about whether lawyers could copyright their court
Yeah.
filings and concern about copying court filings. So I don't know. What is there actually a
That's a
rule against
lawyer.
this?
Well, this would be
The
trademark. This would be
Professional.
trademark, right? I
The
mean,
rule-
they'd have to have a mark on the dragon, right? If that's the logo, unless there's just some random dragon that they throw on there.
If you
Uh,
trademark a picture of genitalia, you can't put that on your like legal pleading. Come on. Like there's a
Well,
lot
Well,
of
but
this
professional.
well, that's
wasn't
different.
genitalia. This was
That's
a
different.
dragon
Yeah.
in a suit.
Which, yeah, I mean, I'm sure they have all the rights to on their side, but my guess is whether or not there's a local rule about it or a judge-specific rule, there's probably rules that are being interpreted here that are like, you should use 12-point font on white paper, blah, blah, blah. And they're using that to prevent, to say, don't do this. I've never understood, and I've seen more professional ones too, where people don't have a dragon, but just like have their firm name in a watermark. And I don't get it. I don't understand. Like, presumably, if somebody's looking to find out whether or not they should hire you, they are not going to Pacer to figure out what you filed in the past, right? Like, I'm sure this logo is great on a billboard, but why in the world would you ever put it on here? Like, not that it and not necessarily that they shouldn't be allowed to. What's even the logic of it?
Well,
Like, do you
that's
really think it's going to be like the judge being like, "Ooh,
Right.
dragons, you win"? Like, well, I don't.
Yeah.
But what if it's one of those like no, like all publicity is good publicity, right? Because like, look, he didn't
Well,
like he didn't cite any made up cases. He didn't fuck up in court. He didn't do anything like blatantly unethical. He could just say, hey, you know what? I was trying to brand, and
yeah.
I was told this is wrong. I didn't know this, and hey, no harm, no foul. But hey, in the meantime, why don't you check out my website? Why don't you check out this? It's not the worst thing.
That is true.
for the basic parts of the first thing you need to think about marketing is what's your goal and where's your audience, right? Like if the goal is to somehow go down some weird pathway and end up with a newspaper story about you, okay, maybe I think that's sort of an unlikely outcome that he ended up with it. But I mean, if your goal is for law firm branding for purposes of making sure everyone knows who your law firm is and what it does, that I agree with Joe. Like this isn't the way to do it. It's a pretty ineffective way, and you're just annoying the judge and everybody around you who's reading this dumb pleading. So
Like,
I
I
think
want
it's a stupid thing
You
to
said
do.
the word marketing, and I'm like, in no world should a court filed brief be marketing.
But that's what it was. It
One
was
would think.
branding. So that's what
Yeah.
was so
Yeah.
weird about it. Yeah.
Well,
So
I agree with the
what's relatable
judge.
about it.
I'm also
But
very
maybe, as I
tired.
said, this was a intellectual property move. There was an attempt to protect his work product from somebody else picking it up and copying it wholesale. Again, the issue we were talking about last week about the fact that lawyers are concerned about the IP rights in court filings that they make, and is there a copyright in a court filing or whatever else? So if you
Well, I was just going to say, but when it ends up being searchable on Westlaw, it's not going to be the PDF. It's going to just be the text. Like, I mean, I think that's true. I think that is it's either marketing or it's some sort of an IP protection. And in either case, I don't think it meets its mission other than, which I think Victor's right about, the no publicity is bad publicity moment of I'm going to do this and I'm going to be something that a legal tech show is going to talk about for 15 minutes,
And we're talking
which
about it.
success,
You would
right?
have
Did it,
to that,
right?
though.
He succeeded. I have to say, I tried to reach out to forget his name now, but Mr. Dragon, and the email on their site does not work. So
The marketing's not that great then.
and I couldn't tag them on LinkedIn, so I'm a bit like,
all right, well, so maybe now we could talk about how law schools are teaching students about
the
Gen
name
AI,
the name of this chapter is How to Train Your Dragon.
how to train. Yeah.
I'll give that claps.
You were waiting for that this whole time, weren't you?
Yeah. Victor,
Yep.
how to of course, this isn't even an AI issue or a hallucination issue. This is just a
Yeah, it's just it
whatever, a
was
weird lawyering issue.
well this story that that we ran this week. It's so what it is our reporter Julian Hill, who does a lot of legal ed stuff, was just curious about how some law schools are already integrating AI into their into the curriculum and whatnot. And it's the law schools that we would expect, the ones with the the more tech savvy deans or people on faculty who are more open to this type of stuff. So it's like Case Western, Suffolk, and like there's one in Miami as well and whatnot. So actually, it is Miami. Sorry. And then so I mean, some of the tools that sound pretty cool. Like there's some of them are being like one of them that I thought would have been really cool for me was using sort of combining it with virtual reality or augmented reality to take them through a hearing or take them through like you know uh, like a transactional proceeding and whatnot. So I thought that sounded really cool, and that's something I would have wanted to have access to in law school. Obviously, still in its infancy. There's only a handful of schools. A lot of schools, just based on the report that came out of the story, is that a lot of schools are still just kind of struggling with how they're even gonna whether they're going to integrate it into their curriculum as opposed to how they're going to. So these schools are definitely ahead of the curve as far as what they're doing and what they're already giving students access to. And it's one of the things where it's like it depends on how you feel about it. Like, do you think it's going to be important enough to have your graduates or have your future lawyers know enough about the stuff that they can then bring it to whatever place they end up practicing, or is it something that you think is all right? Well, they'll pick it up when they get there, and it's not that big of a deal, and it's not something that we need to waste resources, and because it's not going to be cheap to come up with these to develop these programs integrated and whatnot. So that's sort of the struggle that's still happening. It's not like just cost benefit analysis, but hopefully there's more schools that will see the benefit of it, and I mean, just if nothing else, just to give students just a little bit more practical knowledge, because that's something that and anyone here that's ever been to law school knows is not something that they really emphasize.
I think that it's incredibly important for the schools to be doing this because, and again, we had a lot of talked about a lot of things this morning at that talk at the presentation. But another thing that came up was law schools and how they're approaching this. And one thing that came up was that in these larger firms, we know this, they fully expect to reduce the number of associates as a result of AI, but they're expanding roles within their firms to help figure out how to use AI, how to, which tools to use, how to train on AI, like how to train the firms on AI and implement AI and figure out how it's going to fit in the firms. And so clearly you need legal training to understand how a law firm works and what the roles and the things that lawyers do. So I think that it's going to be essential for these young law students coming out of law school to have this knowledge in order to get these new roles and be positioned to succeed in the new world order, quite frankly.
I was just at the LitCon at Suffolk Law School a couple of weeks ago, which is their kind of one-day conference for their Lit Lab. Um, but like one of the things is Suffolk is doing really well is not just teaching AI, but hands-on development of like real-world projects. I mean, they had part of that day is having students kind of present their end of semester projects they've been working on, and again, they're real things. Like one of them is there's like in Massachusetts, there's a sort of a, a special appellate process for pro se litigants that these students kind of worked with the court system to develop this AI assist, so pro se litigants can get AI assistance in developing the filings and the pleadings and even the briefs that they need for this appellate process. And it's like a court endorsed work with a court, real thing. It's not just like a project they were doing. It's something that's actually going to be used and implemented. And a whole bunch of projects like that of students working with the courts and other organizations to apply AI in really practical terms. So I think that kind of stuff is just amazingly valuable.
Yeah,
All right.
I
Yeah.
mean, I think it's a good skill to have, regardless of regardless of where you stand on the whole, role of AI and law. It's just a good skill to have, and any skill that you can get differentiate yourself from the rest of the crowds. That's not a bad thing.
Yeah, they've got to hit. It's
Yeah.
changing so fast. I think this is the thing, that's changing so fast. At your conference, Stephanie, you ended up with Cat Moon talking about how if we think the pace of change now is quick, that we've kind of got no idea really. That it's just going to speed up, and so you got these students in college quietly beavering away in the way they've always done, and then they hit the real world. It's just, I think there's not time for them to be, they haven't really got anymore got the luxury of doing that, I don't think.
Well, it's changing so fast. It's like the cloud was a slow burn, but AI is a sudden spark.
Yeah.
Right, Nikki?
Is that
Which
my-
happens to be the title of Nikki's piece this week.
Yeah, it's let's see, I have it queued up.
Yahoo!
Uh, Victor, Victor was kind enough to share a press copy of the legal industry report with, not legal industry report, ABA legal tech,
ABA, yeah.
which I've been able to, had been able to get in the past, although not for a few years. But
They wouldn't give you one this year?
huh?
They wouldn't give you one this year?
I was able to get one this year, but for a few years I had a hard time because I was always asking for it through my company, and it never occurred to me to ask for a press copy. I don't know why. I guess I probably should have followed that tactic a while ago. But in any event, I have written about. I love that report, and I read it or summaries of it over the years, and I've written about it many, many times. And so I went back through all of the reports that articles I'd written about it, and also some of the articles that had been written on the ABA site about various reports, and then also looked at some of the reports that I still have available from prior years, and pulled data on mobile devices, the cloud, and AI, just to sort of compare over the years what those statistics looked like. And I believe the questions that I was reporting that data on were all the same, but sometimes it's hard to tell. So sometimes I know that with mobile devices, for example, it shifted from do you use a mobile device and for law-related purposes to how do you use it? Because once it got to about 97%, I think they're like, well, this is a dumb question to keep asking. So they changed the thrust of the question. So that was one thing I noted in the article, but it was interesting to note how, and I use legal AI, the law practice management companies that came out with in 2008. There were one or two companies that predated them, like NetDocs claims, they're not claim, but they say that they have had the cloud since 98 or something. And I still have a hard time wrapping my mind around what that looked like from their perspective before EC2 and stuff came out. Like they had a private cloud somewhere, I guess. But more typically, EC2 came out in 2007, then 2008 is when you saw some legal platforms. And so I kind of use that as the benchmark for how quickly there, where cloud adoption could have.
Well, there were cloud servers before EC2, but yeah. those
Yeah,
companies.
but on a scale that was a lot more costly, I think.
Yeah, definitely.
So that made it economical for companies to build software on it. But so I just sort of used 2008 as the benchmark starting point for cloud and cloud adoption. And, before the pandemic, we were at like 48%, if I recall correctly. And after the pandemic, initially, right at like in the middle of it, was around 50-something%. But then it very quickly jumped, like in 2021, I think in 2022, I don't have this article in front of me, but to like 75%, and that's of lawyers that know they're using the cloud. We all know that probably 99% of lawyers use the cloud in one way or another and just don't know they're doing it. But it took a long time, like until 2023 or so to get to that point from 2008, right? And so it was interesting to compare that to AI. I've been writing and tracking AI for a long time comparatively in the legal industry. And I started writing my ABA journal articles on it in about 2017 or 18. And I had a 2018 stat, which I think was, gosh, I'd have to look at the article, but it was pretty low. In 2018, only 8% of respondents said they used AI tools in their practices. And again, that's the percent that understood they were using, but I still think that was probably pretty accurate. And the rates increased gradually to 10% in 2021 and then 11% in 2022. And I believe that survey was taken shortly after ChatGPT was released. in November 2022. And then it's really interesting to see then the 2024 report, you're up to 30% of legal professionals, primarily lawyers from that report, because that's who was surveyed, saying that they're using legal AI tools in their practice and or AI tools in their practice. And that's, you know, from 2018 where you were at 8% to 2023 where you're at almost a third of all legal professionals. That's a pretty significant leap, and it was happened pretty quickly. And that I also pointed out that that data point is pretty accurate because across reports that have been released in the last 6 months or so, everyone's right around 30%, give or take a few percentage points, usually a little bit over, but in terms of what percentage is using it in their practices. So I just thought it was super interesting to kind of try to look at the big picture, which is one of my favorite things to do across the years of these different types of technologies and compare them and just have another benchmark point that shows how rapidly generative AI is being rolled out and adopted in our profession and how different that looks compared to what all other preceding technology adoption really looked like.
One of the weird things about the ABA survey was it never talked about what kind of AI it was talking about. It never talked about whether it's talking about generative AI. It never used the phrase generative AI. It never used the phrase large language models. It just talked about AI. So it got kind of confusing in terms of its stats and the way it tracked them. But
I think we're getting to the point where you just have to talk about AI because all of the companies, as they start to build it in, some of it's generative AI, some of it's LLM, some of it's machine learning, and then it's all in the back end being pulled together to produce whatever results the user necessarily needs. And generative AI is a subset of AI, right? So I've started it's hard to talk about generative AI specifically, and I'm starting to talk about AI more often than not. So I agree, it's kind of strange that they didn't at least ask the follow-up question and and how about generative AI? Like what percentage of the AI you're using is generative AI or something. But I think it's starting to get cloudy, no pun intended.
yeah, that's fair. But if you're talking about sort of the track of lawyers' adoption of AI, then you can't. You either. I mean, a lot of the surveys seem to start with generative AI and forget about everything that happened with AI before that, and some of them kind of mush it all together. So it just helped to be able. It's good. It's good if they can be more clear about what they're talking about when they're talking about it.
Yeah, good point. I agree. It helps. But so it wasn't
All right.
earth-shattering, but it was interesting. I feel like I say that about a lot of my articles, but
I don't know how many of us have done an earth-shattering article in the last year, but
I don't know.
raise your hand.
Joe
Raise
has a
your
lot.
hand if you've done an
Joe has a lot of.
earth-shattering article.
Joe,
Yeah.
I've
We
written
just
some that
plot
shatter
along.
I've written some that shatter my confidence, but I don't know about shatter.
Yeah. All right. So some people are going to clock next week. I forget who's going to clock.
I am.
Stephanie.
I'm not.
Steve.
That's it.
Yeah, I wasn't originally. I was a last minute shift. I was not originally intending to, go to Vegas 3 days after flying home from London.
Yeah.
But
I'd like to. I really wanted to go, but I can't go. But they actually reached out last week saying,
I
inviting me,
think,
wanting to make sure I'd gotten their other invitations.
is this the last year they're in Vegas?
I don't know.
They're definitely in Chicago next year. I don't know if that's a
Yeah.
permanent shift, but
I think they've always been in Vegas, right? Or at least the last several ones have been in Vegas, I think.
yeah, I think always. But
I think
next
so,
year is
yeah.
definitely Chicago, and they're doing a big 10th anniversary thing of Clock this year with Flowrider.
Oh, that's a good reason for me to fly out.
There'll be some fun people watching.
All right. Well, if you're back by next Friday, we can hear all about it.
Yeah, I will be. And I did future me a service of not taking the red eye home from Vegas. I am too old for that shit. Yeah.
All right. Good. Well, hey, Caroline, thanks so much for
Thank you.
making the effort today. It's now you go to bed or go out or whatever.
Yeah, I'll go back out now.
Light out, really. So,
You get to celebrate David Beckham's birthday, right? Isn't that a national holiday for you guys?
Is that why we have Monday off? Is that the reason it's a bank holiday?
No,
Because David
you
Beckham.
always have every Monday.
Thanks,
All right.
guys. It's really nice to see you.
All right. Good. Well, good to see you all, and we'll be back next week. Hope you'll all join us then. See you then.
Bye.
Bye.